Hi everyone, and welcome back to Loose Sews. Today is day 2 in the Pinup Girls Diamond Bustier pattern tutorial. If you missed day 1, I'll link it up in the iCards above. Today we're going to start sewing together all of our fabrics. Let's get started. So when we left off last week, we had pinned together the side edges of our lower cut pieces as well as our bridge piece. So the first step today is going to be sewing those together. I've set up my machine with a polyester based thread. Like I said, I'm going to be using the Superior Sew Fine thread, but I also find that Gutermann Mara 120 works really well for lingerie type fabrics, though Sew Fine is particularly useful if you're working with a tough to sew through fabric like duoplex or micro duoplex. So I have my machine set up with that thread. I've also got my fresh needle in. Make sure that you're using a brand new needle, especially if you're working with tough fabrics like duoplex. And we're going to sew these with 1/4 inch with a straight stitch. So I'm going to bring you over to the machine and get started with that. Okay, so I have a walking foot on my machine. My walking foot does have a little mark on it that indicates 1/4 inch. So I'm going to stay aligned with that, and I'm just going to drop my presser foot and start sewing with a straight stitch. Particularly with these tough fabrics, it might be useful to hold on to your thread from behind to keep it from being sucked down into the presser foot or the throat plate. So now I have both of these bottom cups sewn up. Before I put these to the side, I do want to top stitch them down. So I'm going to make sure that I have both the lining fabric and the exterior fabric pulled pretty taut to get that as flat as possible. And then I'm actually aligning the 1/8 inch marker on my presser foot with my first seam line, and I'm just going to top stitch that down just so it keeps everything nice and flat and held into position. Again, hold on to your thread tails to make sure you don't get stuff sucked into the throat plate. So now that we have our lower cut pieces top stitched, we can add on the upper cut piece. Now when you're looking at these, in order to make sure you have the right one, and you're looking at your 3-piece lower cup, the smaller triangle is the one that goes to the center front or towards the bridge, and the larger triangle goes towards the outside wire line. So once you have your cups sorted out and you can figure out which one goes on which side, we want to pull together the upper cup pieces here. And just like we did for the ones below, we are going to take the overlay piece, flip it upside down, and attach it along this cross cup seam edge. And once we finished attaching the overlay piece, then we're going to attach the duoplex to the other side of the cup. Okay, once your overlay is pinned into place, we're going to take this one, and of course we have the shiny side facing up, and I want the shiny side facing out when I put it on my sandwich. So I have the shiny side facing out, and just rearrange all of those pins into place. I like to start at the 2 corners and then sort of work my way towards the center. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this other cup together and then meet you over at the machine. So just like with the lower cup piece, we're going to sew this with a straight stitch at 1/4 inch along that pinned edge. Then we're going to pull out the lining fabric and the overlay, make sure that they're taut, and then top stitch these 1/8 inch away from your original seam line with a straight stitch. So unfortunately my camera ran out of battery, so I didn't get this in the shot, but after going ahead and top stitching these cross cup seams here, I just ran a quick line of basting stitches along the neckline edge of the cup, attaching 2 layers together. So you can see I just have these really long, straight basting stitches. And the reason I'm attaching them together is the next step is going to be fold over elastic. And when dealing with 2 layers of fabric like this, I just find it's easier if they're tacked together. So with fold over elastic, we're going to do another line of basting stitches, and I'm going to baste the fold over elastic from the underneath of the bra cup, and I want the edge of the bra cup aligning with that middle edge, the middle portion of the fold over elastic. So the elastic has this sort of shiny side and it has a matte side, so you should choose which one you want facing out. I think for me, I want the shiny side facing out, which is not normally how I do it, but I think it'll look best with this bra. So if I want shiny side facing out when I finish, I want to baste it in with my matte side facing up. So long, straight basting stitches all the way along the edge of this elastic here. And I am going to put a little bit of tension on the elastic while I'm sewing, not a ton. So just like probably about this much versus this is relaxed and this is how much tension I'm going to put on it. And that will help just make it have a nice smoother curve instead of having waviness when you're finished. So I've sunk my needle into the project in the start. That way I have something to pull against on my elastic. So once that's basted on, I want to switch my machine over to a zigzag stitch. I'm just using a standard zigzag, so it looks like 3 millimeters wide by 1.5 long. And I'm going to fold my fold over elastic over onto the right side of the bra and zigzag it in place. And here we have the cups once that fold over elastic is applied onto them. It does give it a nice, clean finish edge. Now I'm going to set these cups aside and start putting together the frame. So the frame is super easy. All we need to do is do a straight stitch at 1/4 inch down both of these pinned sides. Then flip everything outwards and top stitch it down. Now we can flip everything to the right side. So now you should have something that looks like this. And so now we're just going to finish this upper edge of the bridge. And this is a way that I don't think that I've shown on my channel before, but it's a nice way to do it if you want to do these side seams first. So what I'm going to do is pull this bridge piece down this way, and I'm going to go down underneath the bottom of the bra, and then back up to meet the bridge piece at the top. And we're going to sew this with 1/4 inch and a straight stitch. So just make sure that you don't have anything twisted, right? It just should look like a burrito. Okay, so now that is sewn into place there. And you can just pull everything back around to the right side. And now you have a nice finished edge up here. I am going to go ahead and top stitch this down as well, just because it looks like it's sticking up a little bit. And this is what it looks like. Instead of top stitching, I just did an understitch. So I pulled this apart and just stitched on the back side alone. That way you don't see any of the stitching from the right side of the bra. But the next thing that we are going to do is insert our cups into this frame. So this one, I don't have any great tips for you other than just have a lot of patience. So what I like to do is I like to align my bridge piece first with the upper edge of my cup piece. I think it's most important that that aligns perfectly. If stuff doesn't align perfectly over on this edge, I can always just trim and true it up and stuff like that. But the bridge, you're kind of stuck with what you get. Now you do have a ton of notch marks along your frame to help you sort of get your cup aligned in there properly. So what I like to do is align all of my notch marks first, get them pinned into place. So this notch mark aligns with the cup seam. So you don't have any notches on your cups, but the notches align with the seams. So I like to do all of my notches first and then sort of just squish everything in after that. And I sort of do this just like I'm easing in a sleeve head on a shirt. Like, I think more pins are better. But just sort of like curve it around your fingers, form that curve, and then pin it into place. And then once I have one cup pinned into place, I'm going to go ahead and sew this before I pin in the second cup, just because I don't like getting stabbed. So I'm going to take this over to the machine and sew it into the place. I actually think it's easier to sew from the frame side because this is where I'm more apt to get tucks. So if I have the frame facing up, then I can be assured that I'm not getting any tucks as I'm sewing along that curve. We're going to do a straight stitch at 1/4 inch. So here's what the first one looks like when sewn in. And then you just want to make sure that you're not getting any sort of tucks along here and that it's setting in nicely. So you can see here where my cup is just a little bit taller than my frame. That's perfectly fine. I'm just going to take some scissors and true that up. So now I'm going to go over to my second cup piece and repeat that, pinning it into place and sewing with 1/4 inch straight stitch. So here it is with this second cup sewn into place. So the last thing that we're going to do today is just to attach our back band pieces. So when we're setting out our back band, the side that has the longer straight edge, so obviously this long straight edge is going to be attached to the side seam. But on this side, you should have one that's a little bit taller than the other. This is the one that's going to be the hook and eye, so you want that along the waist of the bra. So we're going to align our straight edges here, making sure that we have the piece oriented correctly, and stitch it with 1/4 inch at a straight stitch. I'm not going to bother top stitching the side seam because we'll be using boning next week. That will cover everything up. And here's what that looks like once it is sewn into place. So just that straight stitch there will form the back band of our bra. This concludes day 2 of the Diamond Bustier tutorial. Make sure you're subscribed and come back next week when we finish this bra up. Take care!